Well, hi there, and welcome to another episode of Unstoppable Mindset. Today, we get to do something in the unexpected part of where inclusion, diversity, and the unexpected meet. At least I didn't expect it until it suddenly happened, and that is that we get to interview Brian Drury, and this is our second interview with Brian. We met him a few months ago. He did a podcast. It has gone live, and he and I have talked, and we agreed he ought to come back again and chat with us some more. And so here we are to talk about what's happened since, what's been going on that we didn't get to talk about in the first podcast, and anything else that seems relevant to do. So, Brian, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset again.
Thanks for having me back, Michael. Stoked to be here, man.
Well, we're really glad you're here and looking forward to having a lot of fun. And if you remember Brian's bio from before, he is a trilingual English, Spanish, and Portuguese speaker. He does a lot of things dealing with public speaking, effective communications, and other stuff I'm sure he is perfectly willing to talk about, much more relevant than I. So, Brian, what's happened since we chatted last time? I know you had a big event coming up. How did that go? Tell us about it.
Well, the event went great, and for anybody, I'll plug it right here at the front. So for anyone who wanted to connect last time, so it's the Brian Drury on social media. So at the Brian Drury, TheBriandrury, and then if you want to email me directly, questions, comments, concerns, whatever, it's BRIAN. So Brian at guide2speaking.com. So that is GUIDE, the number 2. And then SPEAKING.com. So Brian at Guide to Speaking. Feel like I'm doing a spelling bee. So Michael, you had asked about the event. So yes, so I had a big event coming up. And as I have found almost every time with self-hosted events is when you expect things to go to plan, you are planning to fail. So essentially every time I have self-hosted an event, there have been unpredictable, unexpected events and things that transpire that either throw off the promotion, throw off the preparation for, and so you rarely have as much time as you expect. So what I would say for people who want to be speakers or trainers or want to get into this world and they want to do events where they're talking to larger groups of people, be ready to not have that week to 10 days before the event go as planned. So many people will say like, oh yeah, that's when I'm going to do my most prep, or that's when I'm really going to rehearse. But the thing that you and I know, Michael, that the real pros are prepped and ready well before that, so that when the event actually comes up, if they can't rehearse as much in the week leading up, it's not a big deal. So all of that to say, I was coming up on this event, and this kind of ties into one of the other topics I had sent over to talk about was my first year, full year as a full-time entrepreneur. So I worked in a corporate supply chain career for a little over a decade. And during that time, I was building my own coaching and speaking and consulting business outside of it. So for 7.5 years, I was building this company while working full time. So then in April of last year, and we can dive into this if you want, but how I came to the decision is a whole nother story. But ultimately, I hit the point where I said, my day job had gotten so terrible that I finally hit a breaking point and just said, it's time. And it did not go as I planned. It did not go as I anticipated. In fact, I had been in a corporate job. I'd always gotten good or great performance reviews. I always considered myself a top performer and worked to deliver more than I was asked of me. And I had worked to do that every step of my career. And then working in supply chain in the 2020 and beyond was a whole different other kind of nightmare. And I found that more and more of my time was going towards what I didn't want. And I was spending more time on the thing that paid the bills, not the thing that I really wanted to do. And I had all the typical excuses, it's not time. It's not sustainable yet. I want to build it up more. I want more consistent revenue in the business. I had all those things. And I said, one day when I'm making X, $1,000 a month consistently, then I'll just gently take this nice little cute leap and move on to full-time entrepreneurship. But ultimately again, we can dive into this if you'd like, but the details, it's a very common entrepreneurial thing. Things got so bad at the job that ultimately I get called into my weekly meeting with my manager, and it's supposed to be just touch base, talk about how things are going. And my director and HR are there as well. And I'm like, this is probably not a surprise promotion. And they say, you've got 30 days to improve in these areas. And the things that were brought up were things that were either false, very small, or just kind of things where they hadn't talked or communicated to me for over a year. And now we're bringing these things up as issues. And it was basically them saying, we kind of want you out. They were for a variety of reasons. And a part of me fought this and was like, oh no, like I've always worked to give more, this compromises my identity. But then I really thought about it and I was like, well, what your director is telling you is you're not right for this job. And you've known that in your heart for 4 years doing this. So instead of just continuing to sit in that, I said, all right, you know what? It's time to take a shot. It had to get that bad. I mean, there's much, much more to that story of how bad things were. It had to get that bad for me to finally have the courage to take the leap. So
were some of the
go full-time with the entrepreneur. Oh yes, go ahead.
Were some of the things that got bad things that you did? I mean, what do you mean when you say things got bad? Or was it just your head wasn't in it anymore, or what?
It was a combination of things. So the kind of shorter version was in 2020, working in supply chain was one of the most tumultuous times ever. They said it literally, our director told us it was the greatest supply chain disruption since World War II. It's unprecedented ground, and everything came to a standstill for a period of time. And then everything tried to pick up twice as fast. So essentially, at first, everyone's all kumbaya and we're going to hold hands. These are unprecedented times. It's all the cute corporate speak. And because of that, they tell us, oh, you know what? It's all okay. We're going to make mistakes. These times are, crazy. And up to that point, all my feedback had been good. I'd been getting great performance reviews. I was building things. They were talking about getting me on a management track and all these other things. And then towards the tail end of 2020, I made one big mistake. Now it was a big mistake. And I didn't buy 12,000 units, which in the major, I won't specify the brand just for the sake of it, but I worked at a major retail footwear apparel brand that everyone knows. I worked at the corporate headquarters and I missed a big buy. So there's a lot of reasons for that, where crazy things that I won't go into just in terms of how the supply chain disruptions were managed. But ultimately, I found I'd made a mistake and it was irreversible. Like I would have had to order this stuff 3 months ago for it to get there on time. So these big important units weren't going to get there. I tell my boss, I find the error. I let him know as soon as I find it. He has to go to the director, and the director actually had to tell the president of the company because these were like big marketed styles. And so it was a huge mistake. And I felt terrible. One of my biggest fears is letting people down. And the director came and had this come to Jesus call with me, and essentially told me that this had discredited everything I had ever done. That, the week before when he'd said he wanted me on a management track, my years of going above and beyond were discredited and devalued. Now I had a target on my back. The direct quote was, Brian, I said, have you lost faith in me? And he said, Brian, there's a dark cloud over your head and it's going to follow you for a while. But if you can be consistent for a year, you can earn my trust back, essentially. And he also, in that same conversation, said, don't try to improve things, just execute on the job. And one of the biggest challenges in that job was all of the terrible processes. So for the next year, I tried to do that to my best of my ability. We had a team of 5 people that lost 3 people in the space of 6 weeks. We were going through a system implementation. We had a 20-year sourcing office closed. So all of these crazy challenges, all during the pandemic. Me and one other person kept that entire portion of the business going. For a year, they're telling me everything's fine. And then in the beginning of 2022, I come into the meeting and they had been collecting all mistakes I had made, perceived or otherwise, for the course of a year, while telling me everything was fine. They just took hearsay as truth. So even things that were later disproven or claims that were made, or, I sent this already, just this kind of he said, she said stuff. They just took the other person's side every time. And essentially it was like, you're making headaches for me. So we don't want you. And so basically I come into this meeting and they tell me things like, here's the systemic issues that we've seen in your performance over the past year. Sometimes sends an email in place of a phone call. Sometimes sends overly long emails. Sometimes this and this and this. And most of them were 60% I'd never heard. Several were untrue, like factually incorrect. And when I said, is the point of this meeting for me to share my side of this? And then my director cuts me off and goes, I think it's just best to focus on the path forward. So essentially it was, we don't care what you have to say. We don't trust you. We don't want you. And I honestly, Michael, I believe that even if I'd done everything they said, they would have still fired me after the 30 days. Cause they were just like, he doesn't fit. Cause I would ask questions when I would try to keep our customers. I'd have them adhere to deadlines. I'd say, unfortunately, you missed the deadline, so you'll have to submit it on the next buy. Well, then they just go escalate it up. And now I'm creating a headache by trying to get them to adhere to the agreed upon deadlines. So there's a lot of different things that went into it, but I'll pause there for a sec because it was so bad. It just got to the point where I was like, this is never going to change and I'm not going to change this. So I'd rather get into a situation where even if it's scarier, I'm in control of the path forward.
Right. And so what did you do?
So the next steps, because the big thing was, I realized this, and I think you'll find many of your listeners have a similar experience, is I realized they were never going to value me for me. They actually, in fact, I'm running a communication and speaking and effective communication business. And in that call, they said, hey, Brian, we've got some great interpersonal communication trainings we could recommend. And like, there were all these things that I was just like, they don't see my value. They don't appreciate me. They don't celebrate me. And I can either stay here and just accept that or try and figure this game out on my own. So April 1st was my last week at that job. April 8th, I left and I went out on my own. Now
that's 2022.
This is 2022, right? So last year. And so I go out on my own and I have found this, I've fought so hard for years. I invested tens of thousands of dollars into my education and personal development events. I had been working and modifying and tweaking my business. So I knew what I wanted to do. And when I left, I had 3 months worth of expenses covered, like in terms of cash. So it was not like I had this big runway or I have a year to figure things out. I'm like, I got 3 months and we'll see what happens. And simultaneously in that time, I started to develop what I thought was sciatica, or a nerve pain kind of in the glute and shooting pain down the leg. And so as I was working to figure out my business, I started to have increasingly bad symptoms. Tried every modality of treatment I could think of to try and make it better, none of which worked. And then got to a point where I went to the emergency room September of last year. They said it's a disc issue in the back. So I spend the next probably 6 months trying to treat it in every way. I got an epidural spinal injection. I tried to do PT. I was doing 1 to 2 hours of PT type work every day and still couldn't beat this thing. So in my whole first 14 months as a full-time entrepreneur, I was battling chronic pain, chronic sleep deprivation, and so many other challenges as a result of that I never could have predicted as the challenges I would face as a full-time entrepreneur. And that ultimately led to spinal surgery. So I had to get a major spinal surgery about 3.5 months ago, got a discectomy and a laminectomy, got the problem fixed. And now 3.5 months later, I'm in recovery and I'm working through things. So managing that, issues with medication, issues with treatment, pain, all this, my whole first 1.5 years of entrepreneurship has been either chronic pain, surgery, recovery, and I'm just kind of getting to the first times of being pain-free since then. So it's one of those things where everyone says you're going to face challenges as, when you go full time, and now it's all on you. And the first year, it was exceptionally hard. And I just tried to focus on the goals and the step forward. I remember seeing my bank account go to $16 and wondering how I was going to pay rent the next month. And then December, I started to get some momentum. I put together some programs. January was a little better. February was a little better. March was my best month yet. And then I had my best quarter ever in my business's history. And at that point, I was averaging, I would say, 1 to 2 hours a day of work because of the pain. And since then, since getting the surgery, now this month in August, I'm having my best month ever, and it's better than that entire quarter. So I am very optimistic about the path forward, because with a healthy body and not chronic pain and being able to sleep again, it's a whole different world. So that's kind of the summary of some of the highlights or lowlights of my first year as a full-time entrepreneur. And I'll pause there because I know there's tons of places we can go, but yeah.
Well, so what exactly did you go off and do? You left the job in April of 2022. And being an entrepreneur, what did you go off an entrepreneur and do?
Well, that's a great question as well. So, for several years, I started my business back in 2015. So at first I just said coaching, because I didn't really know what type of coaching I was doing. I just said, I'm a coach, and I can help you get great results and achieve goals and dreams. So the whole thing for me was, if I'm going to try and motivate and inspire people to do those things, live their dreams, I've got to do that myself. So I started just working to achieve all of these goals and dreams, and launched a business, published a book that became an Amazon bestseller, launched a podcast, moved to a new dream place, got a dream job where I got paid to travel. So I started doing all this through personal development and then teaching those skills. And I remember, for anybody that's scared about getting started or how do you charge for your first client, my first client was just a friend of mine who said, hey, Brian, I love the results you're getting, and I want those too. I want you to coach me. I said, okay, well, I'm trying to start a business. So are you cool if I charge you? He said, sure. He said, how much? I was like, $300 a month. We'll do one call a week. So like $75 an hour. He's like, sounds great. Sounds great. And that was the beginning. So after that, I did that for a couple of years, but I said, I need to be more clear. I need a better niche. I need more clarity. So I realized, okay, well, achieving any goal is the product of habits and how you live day to day. So now I'm going to become a habit coach. So I'm going to help people effectively set goals and establish the habits to achieve those goals. So lots of study in human psychology and human behavior, and trying to help people optimize their habits, get rid of the bad ones, implement the good ones, get the mental blocks out of the way, and get to work and create results quickly. Because both in my corporate job and in my entrepreneurial pursuits, my thing is about results and momentum and change. I don't think it's enough just as a speaker just to motivate. I think we should be giving insights and changes and help prompt people to take action. So I did that for about 3.5 years. And then that was when my speech went viral. So 2014 was the first time I met Sean. I believe I shared this story on the first one. So my speaker and mentor, Sean Stevenson, one of the most prolific speakers on the planet before he passed. From 2014 to 2018, he went from this untouchable hero to one of my best friends, and he was introducing me to speak on his stage. At that event, that speech, that recording went on to go viral and has been seen over 20 million times up to this point. So when that went live, a lot of people assume, they're like, how much money did you make off that? Because people think views or big social presence equals money, and that's really not the case. So I wasn't set up for it. So my Facebook page for that old business grew, but I didn't have any offerings. I didn't have ways to engage people. I wasn't as consistent with content. So I didn't know the things I know now. So what it did do is give me incredible credibility, though, in the ability to deliver great talks. So I could share that. I could use that for promotion. And I started getting more and more questions about speaking and presentation skills and being confident on stage and messaging and crafting and storytelling. So what I realized over time was I kept fighting for this habit change coaching, and I wasn't feeling it as much and I wasn't getting the response. But then when I finally stopped and paid attention, I was like, everyone is asking me about speaking and storytelling. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. And I can help people. I can solve some of people's biggest problems in 30 minutes, and then we can go even deeper. So why not just, meet the supply and demand together, where match those two? Because it's often the entrepreneurial idea is the intersection of, what can we do well? What do people want? What can we get paid for? And now, after years of all these different iterations and trying things and making information products and all these different tests, I finally found that intersection of the thing I loved, that I'd worked with some of the best in the world at what they do, and I could give exceptional value. I could get paid for it, and I absolutely loved it. So I shifted gears there. And I didn't change. My original business was called Overcoming Graduation, because it was about teaching young adults everything I wished I'd known about life to help them live the life of their dreams. And I didn't change the brand. I didn't change the business. I just started focusing on speaking. So I started to grow and was doing that while I was working full time. So ultimately, when I got to the point of it's time to leave, I said, you know what? I'm going doubling down on speaking. I'm going full tilt into this. So I got to create a new brand. So the first, honestly, Michael, like first 2 months, I really was like, I needed to decompress. I kind of had some, like by the end of my career, I had originally said my supply chain career. I had originally said, all right, I'm going to get paid to move out to California by this company. I'll spend like 2 years getting settled, getting established. And then after 2 years, I'm going to go full time into my entrepreneurial stuff. I'll build it up. That 2 year mark was 2020. So, as we tend to make plans and life has great curveballs to throw our way. So 2020 hits. I'm like, well, let's not be rash here. Right. And it's that convenient excuse not to take the big leap. So then 2 years and 2 months later is when I ultimately got the 30-day notice. And so now that by the end of it, I was so drained, I was working 10, 12-hour days. I was working on weekends and I was pouring so much time fighting for a job that I hated and not spending time on the thing that I loved, that I really wanted to fight for. And when things got that bad, my dad said to me, he's like, Brian, it's probably time to stop fighting for what you don't want and fight for what you do. And the way that I left the company too, I wanted to make sure that I didn't compromise my values. So I said, hey, listen, I'll give you guys a month so I can properly train people, even though, I don't think I was treated well. I don't think this was handled well. I'm not going to let that dictate my behaviors because I had let my standards slip while I was there. I had started to just make excuses and get lazier and justify these things and play the victim. And so I said, I'm going to raise my standard back up to my standard. I spent a month training everybody. They didn't offer any severance. They didn't offer anything. And I was like, you know what? Good. This is going to make the story better to tell. And during the leaving corporate, so the first time not having a full-time job since college and all of these things, that was one of my big messages. That was one of the things I carried was Sean, my mentor, told us, if things go wrong in your life or don't go as planned, as a speaker, you should be thrilled because it makes great content for the stage. So the whole time when things were crazy and chaotic, I would just say, this is going to make the story better to tell. This is a great one I love to share with people. So I said, you know what, 2 months, I'm just kind of decompressing. I'm taking breaks. I went to San Diego and took a trip with the girl I was dating at the time and was like, oh my God, okay, I'm finally doing it. So now let's figure this game out. I said, you know what? I need to rebrand, spend some time figuring out a new brand. I said, you know what? Guide to speaking. I really like that. That fits. So I make a new website. I announce the new brand. I go through all this work, finally launch it. And then all of my mentors go, hey man, everyone is moving towards personal branding now. It's far better and it's more flexible. So, your business changes in 6 months. You still have the same, BrianDrury.com or thebriandrury.com, which I have now. So then I go through another revamp while I'm promoting and trying to get clients. And I started to when I was going to personal development events, I would offer a free hour of coaching people. I would say, hey, we're all at this event. We all came. So I'm just going to give a free hour. And that was great to build my chops and get my skills up even tighter, but I wasn't getting any clients. So then I'm like, I talked to some of my speaking mentors, some of the coaches I've worked with in the past. They said, you need a package or an offering. And so I started to dive deeper into that. I created a 12-week group coaching program and a one-on-one coaching program. And that was where I started to get some momentum and some results. Is towards the end of the year, I did a big launch event. I got 5 people into it, both with giveaways and with paid joining, so people paying to join. And that kind of was the spark for everything else. And so that was all up until like December of last year, was kind of figuring out one big thing that I've said to people that was contrary to what I expected. And I'd be curious to hear if this happened in your speaking career as well. Was I thought for speaking and for coaching, people would want a custom experience. Everyone wants, a custom, perfect for you experience that's just tailored to you in every specific way. But then I realized here's the challenge. When you have conference coordinators and booking agents and people that are busy trying to find someone to pick, instead of a custom menu, they want like the McDonald's menu. They want a number 1, a number 2, a number 3. They want to be able to point to it and then say, no pickles or extra sauce. And so in that way, they get their custom experience, but they have a proven thing. They know what a Big Mac tastes like everywhere. And so that was what I started to do both in product and in speaking. Was I created standard offering signature talks, signature coaching programs, and started to build on those. So that was kind of the first, that like 2022. And then as I got into 2023, I made some more adjustments and things, but those were the initial steps into it and how I started to get my feet under me and get some momentum.
So I would say pretty similar experiences. I have a number of standard talks, but I also tell everyone that talks to me about coming to their event, I customize every talk that I give. So what is it that you need specifically in your presentation from me? What kind of messaging, or now that you know about what I do, what would you like me to include or add or whatever? And I find that oftentimes, especially if I go to an event and get to hear some people who speak before I do, I may be customizing a little bit off of the basic talk right up to and including beginning the talk myself, because what I'm looking for is what is going to have the greatest impact for the audience. What is the audience going to react to? What do they want to hear? And I think people who are organizing events who are good at it do understand that and do understand what it is that audiences want to hear. But even then, the audience can tell you more right up to the time that you begin to talk, because every event is different, even a little bit different than what the planners talk about. So I've learned to judge that when I'm speaking to an audience or with an audience. And I love to say I don't speak to, but I like to speak with, because I want them engaged and I want them to be part of the speech. So I do make sure that I'm interacting in a way that gets reactions from the audience, so I know that they're with me as we go through a presentation. So I do like to customize, but from the basic talk, which is basically what you're saying.
Right, exactly. And that's why, and it doesn't surprise me at all, because I know how experienced you are, and that the best speakers I know put the audience first. And it's obvious,
Yep.
like anybody who watches your speeches see that you do that, because you make it entertaining, you make it fun, they laugh, they cry, like you take them on an emotional journey. And the way my phrasing for it is, I don't want to lecture at an audience, I want to co-create an adventure.
Right.
And so especially when I'm coaching people and speaking, one of the big things is a lot of people think, and I'm really getting some powerful lessons on the balance of like content versus activity and engagement, because my mentor always harped on the criticality of activities, how that's a keep people engaged for the long term. They get a better experience. They have more fun. They make connections. But what I'm realizing more and more is oftentimes in an effort to over deliver value, we take out some of the room for magic. So when I'm coaching speakers, I'm like, if you're doing an hour keynote, it's great to prep for 45. And then you also have a section you can pull out if, inevitably the time changes, someone went too long, etc. So you're prepared for that stuff, so you don't throw the event off. But you also got to leave room for your magic, because each of us has something that we do specially or engagement. And if you bring somebody on stage or have somebody stand up in the audience, and one of the things I'll do is like live keynote crafting. I'll say, okay, give me your premise, give me this, and then I can give them an idea of how I would craft this. Is the less I leave room for that, there's less room for that magic. And like you and I, we can give the same speech over and over and over, and that can get boring, because when a lot of people go, oh, I want this like home run speech. But at some point, if you give it 50 times in a row and when people laugh and this, you can lose the connection if you don't focus on the audience. Right. And you can lose like the energy and the spark. So that's why I love to leave in the room for audience engagement and live activities, because that creates the variability. But also, like you said, come to the event, talk to people, and then weave in those things and use callbacks to other speakers. And that's where you add the novelty, so that this place gets a custom experience and that killer signature talk that you always deliver.
Well, exactly right. And so even though it may be the very same talk, the lack of boredom or the excitement for you as the speaker comes from all the interactions that you do, and the fact that you recognize every audience is different. And so you treat it that way. Even though essentially the same speech may come out of your mouth, it's still going to be different.
Yeah, exactly.
So how did your original speech go viral?
That is, it's one of my favorite stories that, and I don't know if you experience this, Michael, but I'm very quick to kind of downplay or minimize the things I've done, like mentally, like I'm very self-critical and I'm quick to go like, oh yeah, you did that. Like things that were lifelong dreams that I achieved. Once I did them, my brain was like, yeah, but it's just you, it's my imposter syndrome, my negative voices trying to minimize these things. And when people ask me about these stories and I think back, right now it's like, hey, I'm focused on growth. I'm focusing on the new direction, the new product, the new thing. And I appreciate this question because getting to reflect is so important to see both the hard work, but the magic that it took for this to come together. So essentially, the way that it all went down was for 2014 was my first ever Sean Stevenson training event. And at that event, it was 3 months after I'd lost my mom to pancreatic cancer. So I was 24 years old. I was feeling broken and lost. I was more existing than living. Like I was just I kind of shut off. Essentially, I said, and this is all looking back, in the moment I was just trying to survive. I found myself shutting off my emotions because my brain, and again, didn't realize this at the time, but my brain went, you love your mom more than anybody else in the world. It's like your mom, your dad, your brother, the closest people in your life. Losing her hurt worse than anything you've ever felt. You're experiencing more pain, sadness, fear than you've ever experienced. So love equals pain. Emotions equal pain. Just shut off your emotions. And I'm a highly emotional dude. I feel things very intensely. So essentially for a time, I just closed off this entire piece of me because I didn't know, I didn't have the tools that I do now to be able to process and work through that in a healthier way. Now I'd gotten into personal development, thank God, because things didn't go too far astray. So, I said, if I want to have cake for dinner, I'll have cake for dinner. If I want to have 2 beers for dinner, I'll have 2 beers, but I'm not going to become an alcoholic. I'm not going to, just binge eat all day. So I had some controls on it. So I didn't get too far lost, or I didn't go start taking drugs to just try and numb the pain, but I gave myself some grace, which typically I wouldn't do that. And I go to Sean's event, and it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was my first personal development event. And at the end of the event, there's a testimonial. Like I shared on one of the mics at one of the sessions that, I was crying and I was like, I just lost my mom. I don't know where to begin. And then there's a testimonial video at the end of that event where I said, this is the first time I've been happy since my mom passed. And this is what I want to do. Like, this is what I want my life to be about. Because Sean even asked me, he's like, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a speaker and a coach. And it's moments like this where I tell the story and I'm like, I'm doing that now. And I have to remind myself, like someone said to me, even when things were really hard in that, 2022, and I've almost no money in the bank, they're like, Brian, you are living your dream though. Like you are a full-time coach and speaker. You're doing it. It doesn't mean it's always going to be easy, but you're doing it. And those reminders were powerful. So after that event in 2014, I said, that at that point, I think I paid $1,000 for the ticket. And then I had to fly to Arizona to be there from North Carolina. That was insane for me. I graduated with $80,000 in student loan debt and I had a good salary, but I wasn't making tons and tons of money extra. I was paying bills, paying loans. And so paying $1,000 for a ticket was crazy because I had this huge debt. And why shouldn't I pay that down? But that's when I started to invest in development in the way many people invest in, stocks or a home, etc. Because to me, I was like, those skills that I developed can have not just a multiplying effect, but they can have an exponential effect on my ability to create impact and wealth. Because I was like, I don't just want to do something for money. I've done that in the corporate job. I want this to be about my mission, purpose, passion, those words that are really big and scary. But I was like, the things that I know in my heart I'm meant to do. So for the next 3 years, I went to every Sean event I could go to. I just found a way. Sometimes I was taking on a little extra debt and I had to get a client to pay it off. And sometimes I grow my business. Sometimes I took out a loan, but I found a way. And then every year at the end of his events, he had his big year-long coaching program. And it was a huge investment. Every year it got bigger, but you would get all this time with Sean and it was like a dream. And every year I'd see the people standing on stage that ultimately bought in. And I'd say one day that's going to be me. One day it's going to be me. So in 2017, I'm at Sean's annual event. It's called 10K Speeches. And I have that feeling in my heart. I know I've been to all of his events. I know when the offer's coming. I know what it's going to be like. But this year he goes big and he offers more than he's ever offered. And the group is going to take a trip to Hawaii together. And you're going to get a one-on-one day with Sean at his house. And you're going to get events at these different areas and venues in person with Sean. And you're going to get all this time and monthly calls. And so I just found myself going, oh my God, this is the best offer yet. And he gets to the offer and says it's $20,000 to pay up front, or it's $2,000 a month for 12 months. So 24 grand total. And my logical brain goes, there's no way, dude. That's just way too much. You know, like you have 4 grand in your business bank account right now, and maybe like 6 in your personal. So you don't even have the money to cover it now. And your business isn't consistent. Like, so just logically, I'm going through all this, but then lying in bed at night, I'm thinking about it. And the next day I come back and it's the last day of the event. And I'm just sitting there going, my heart is calling me to do this. And so Sean used to say, your intuition can't give you all the answers because it operates off faith. And, you know, for all your listeners, whether it's God or a higher power or the universe or whatever you believe in, there was something in me calling, saying, it's like that call to greatness, that moment where something in you sees something beyond what you're currently living, but it can't give you all the answers because you need to take a step, you know, and you need to take action and operate off faith. So I'm sitting there and I'm freaking out. And then we come to a break, and now Sean is one of my best friends and he's up on stage, and you're not supposed to go up and interrupt. But I go to his wife. I'm like, Mindy, I got to talk to Sean. I'm like, I just need a minute. I need to talk to him because it's coming up on the end of the event. I'm like, I think it's time, but I'm so scared. And so she goes, Brian, you're not supposed to. And I was like, please, just like 2 minutes. And she goes, okay, just real quick. And so I run out to Sean on stage. He looks at me, and he had this way of just seeing into you, you know, not just looking at you. And I'm crying, like I'm losing it, right? Because Sean had changed my life. I want this so bad. This is amazing. I want to. And so I'm like, Sean, I don't know if cursing's allowed on your show or not, so I'll refrain. But I said, Sean, I'm effing terrified. I was like, I want this, but I'm so scared. And I have tears running down my face. And he looks at me and goes, Brian, have I ever let you down? I was like, no. And he goes, so I got you. I said, okay. He's like, so what are you going to do? I was like, I'm going to go sign up. You know, he's like sobbing and snot coming out. And he's like, okay, man, I'm excited for you. And so I went and did it. And that year he gave everyone a cape. So he got this silk cape because the program is called Master Heart. You were the Master Heart heroes. His whole thing was, if I want to teach you to be a world-class speaker, I've got to teach you first to be a world-class human being. So the next year, so I signed up and figured it out, right? And it was messy, and, you know, building up credit card debt. My brother's like, you have way too much debt. So I had to take out a loan to make it more manageable. And then my business grows a little. And it was all this stuff of just figuring it out. And we went to Hawaii together. My first trip to Hawaii, we had group calls together. I had a one-on-one with Sean. And so the big thing at the end of the program was a speaker contest. And if you won the speaker contest, and Sean said you were ready, you would get the opportunity to speak on stage at his next event. So every year I'd seen his students. They were always amazing. I was the youngest guy in the program. 3 months before the event, he announces the challenge. We start preparing, we start rehearsing. And I was doing the thing so many people do. I was going, oh, I've got it in my head. I'm rehearsing in my head, but I wasn't practicing. I'd written it out. I'd never really practiced it. I get to my dress rehearsal 3 weeks before the event. And the whole thing was, it was a 10-minute talk. You come in, you give the speech, and Sean says, okay, we're going to get started. I'm going to set the timer. When you hear the timer, I'm going to give you 3 minutes of feedback, and that's it. So it's in and out. It's real quick. I come in, I'm all confident, thought I had things under control, and bombed. I gave one of the worst speeches I've ever given. And the timer goes off. I didn't even finish. It was just terrible. And Sean would lovingly give you harsh feedback. So he would tell you the truth. And he goes, okay, Brian, that was terrible. And I was like, I know. And he goes, but I want you to know everyone's dress rehearsal sucks. And I said, okay. You know, I was like, I felt a little better, but I was like, I just blew it. And he goes, I'm going to give you a challenge 3 weeks before the contest. He goes, I'm going to give you a challenge. I want you to scrap this entirely, what you've been working on for 3 months, start fresh and do something different. And I was like, Sean, how could you ask me to do that? The event's coming up. This is my best story, my best speech. And I was telling a story about my mom's battle with cancer. And he goes, Brian, you're becoming, without even realizing it, your identity is becoming the guy who lost his mom. It's what you talk about all the time. It's your main story. It's your main thing. And you lead with that because it's a way to get to a deeper conversation quickly. But there's so much more to you than this. He goes, your mom saw it. I know it. And I want you to show yourself that you are so much more than this one story and this one experience. And I think there's an even more powerful story you could tell that will help you realize that you're more than this identity. And so the next week, I had my one-on-one day with him at his house. So now it's 2 weeks till the event. He takes me through an activity. I remembered a story that I hadn't thought of in years. So I just decided, all right, it's time. Because he used to say this thing, don't pad the fall. So often, when we have something coming up, we pad the fall. We give ourselves an out, right? Like, oh, I didn't sleep well. I didn't practice enough. If I'd really rehearsed, I would have done better. He said, so don't give yourself the out of the excuse. Play full out, fail spectacularly, but go for it full out and surprise yourself. So for the next 2 weeks, I worked as hard as I possibly could. I'd ever worked on any speech ever. I practiced every single day. I wrote the speech. I rehearsed it. I did it for friends. I revamped it. I was doing it every night as much as I could because I'm still working full time. Then I fly to Arizona for the event. The night before the event, my Uber driver asked me why I'm there. I say speaker contest. He goes, want to give me the speech? So I did it for my Uber driver. I did it for every person I could that was willing to listen. And then we have the speaker contest at Sean's house the next day. I was the youngest guy in the program and I ended up winning the contest. And they said, we'll text you tonight and let you know when you're going on. So typically in the years prior, because I'd been to every event, they would have the speaker like in the middle or the last day around when they were going to make the offer, the pitch. I get a text around 10 p.m. that night. The event is the next day. And they said, we're going to have you go on first after Sean. So he's going to start the event and then you're the first speaker they see. And he brings on all these world-class speakers and people in marketing and sales. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm the lead off. And he's saying he has that much confidence in me that he's willing to put me right after him. This is his showcase student. So pressure goes up. But at that point, I'd done the prep. I'd done the work. I knew I was ready. And I'd even set my goal not to win the contest. My goal was to give the best speech I'd ever given because that was something I could control. Couldn't control if I won or not, but I could control giving the best speech. So when I knew I was going on the next day, I just said, that's my goal again. Now give the best speech again I've ever given. So I got on stage, I do it. It's my first standing ovation. It was one of the most validating experiences of my life. And Tony Robbins says proximity is power. We often hear you become like the 5 people you spend the most time with, your circle matters, all these different phrases. 2 days later, the founders of a company called Goalcast were speaking at Sean's event as well. Now, Goalcast is like an internet motivation company, and they make motivational videos and they do clips and find like speakers and bring them up to they have all these incredible speeches. And I've been watching their stuff for years. I love their stuff. So after they talked and they came down off the stage, I went up to talk to them and thank them because I was like, listen, your work has impacted me so much. It's helped me through so many tough days. So I'm thanking Salim, who's one of the co-founders. And he goes, Brian, I really appreciate it. So tell me, why are you here? I said, I spoke at the event. I was one of the speakers. And he goes, I'd love to see your speech. And I lost I was like, oh, and he goes, no. He goes, I'm not saying we're going to use it. I'm just saying I'd love to see it. And I said, hey, just the fact that you want to see it. After the event, I sent him the speech. And, even the editor for Sean's programs had to pull some strings to get it done faster. I was like, there's this huge opportunity. Didn't hear from Salim for 2 months. And then all of a sudden, I get an email that says your video goes live on Monday. And I still didn't even believe it at that point. And I was like, I don't want to assume, not until it's out there live. And then a week later, it goes live and it gets out to the world. It has 1 million views in the first day. Then it hits 10 million in the first week. I'm having people from all over the world reaching out to me. I'm having friends I haven't talked to in years go, oh my God, I know this guy. And it was just surreal. It was my first experience with virality. And it was incredible and overwhelming in many ways, but it was also just proof of what Sean had talked about. When you play full out, you don't pad the fall, you give it your all, you have no idea where your story can go and how much reach it can have. And there was so much magic that took place and so many little things about being in the room and knowing who Goalcast was and just going up to thank them, not asking anything, and that turning all into this incredible thing that really changed the course of my career and my life was that speech going viral, because that's a large part of why I'm doing what I am today.
So what exactly do you do as a coach? What do you coach about?
So my coaching is primarily, I think, to give the broadest stroke, is effective communication, because I help people with this in a variety of ways. And what I've seen in my career, but also this is true of every coach I know that continues to iterate and find what works and change their niche to better fit, was it's an amalgamation of everything that I've done. So I spent years studying psychology and human behavior and habit change and storytelling and all of these different elements. So I have an ability to help people craft their stories in the most effective way to take people on a journey. So what that's led to is keynote crafting is one of the areas where I help people craft keynote speeches or TED Talk type speeches and help them actually go through and step-by-step craft a world-class speech. But then I also have presentation skills. So when I'm doing corporate trainings, recently I've done an event I call Elevate Your Elevator Pitch, where I'm helping them create a redefined, reimagined elevator pitch, because I don't like the original one or the way people typically do it. I do events on non-cringy networking is another one that I do. Effective sales, pitch and presentation skills, public speaking skills. So as you said, I go to the clients with kind of my list. I have a PDF of my programming guide, which is standard offerings. Here's, 3 of my development trainings. Here's 3 of my business development trainings. And then here's 5 keynotes they can choose from. And then that prompts the conversation, gets them started. I understand very clearly what they need and go from there. So with coaching, I have done group coaching. I've done one-on-one. And then also I have the corporate training side. So what's been great about my business is building it in a way. And again, it took years and years of testing and iteration to figure out what I wanted to do and where I could bring the most value. But for the right audience and market, if they're an author and they're about to go on a book tour, having a signature talk that they know really hits and is going to help them sell books and get more exposure and press is huge. I've done media training. I've helped C-suite executives prep for big sales pitches and offerings. I've helped people I've worked with these Soldier's Medal winner. So it's the 3rd highest commendation someone can win in the U.S. military. I'm helping right now a former Navy Special Ops rescue swimmer. I've helped people in training development. So I'm getting to touch in all these different worlds and help people with all these different elements, because essentially at the core of everything I do, I'm going to help you have confidence and clarity in your messaging. So whether that's helping you craft a more effective one-liner and, digital presentation, or having a speech or a short form talk, what I help people do is understand how to more effectively present what they do, to not just look confident, which is one thing, but it's to feel confident and to do so in their authentic voice. Because a lot of what I help people do is shed the nonsense that we think we have to put on to be taken seriously or to be credible. I help them get rid of that so they can focus on creating something that is authentic to them and helps them grow their business, increase their impact, et cetera. So those are really the primary areas, is my group and one-on-one coaching. And then I do have individual consulting I do on a more ad hoc basis. And then the corporate trainings where I'm doing, 2 to 4 hour trainings on a specific topic related to that audience.
Definitely exciting. And you certainly have come a long way since April of 2022, haven't you? Well, you prepared for it. So it's not like you've come a long way since April of 2022. You'd been preparing a long time before April of 2022, but you finally made the leap and decided to put it together and actually do it.
Right. And that's the big thing. You hear all the time people are like, oh, it took 10 years to become an overnight success and blah, blah, blah. And that was one thing I learned very early on is there's no shortcuts. And so the thing for me is there are no shortcuts, but there's better strategies. And so through mentorship, you can find the strategies that work. And then it just takes you putting in the work to get the results. And what I have found here, now it's August of 2023. It's crazy because it's August 31st. I can't believe it's already September.
No.
But what I have found for me has been the best thing for building business is person-to-person connection and referral-based business. Because so many people go, I need to build a big social. I don't have any impressive social following. I don't have a big email list. I mean, my email list is, I think, less than 200 people right now. But what I have found is by really focusing on over-delivering for each client you meet, really understanding their needs, and then building good relationships, it's one of the best ways to do this, because people often forget, especially in entrepreneurship, you're the brand, you're the business, when you're the face of it as a speaker or a coach. But the big thing is people aren't just booking you for your expertise, or your credentials, or what you've done. They're booking you for you. So I remind clients of this all the time. Like, if you just connect and really genuinely care about the people you're working with, you're going to build stronger relationships and make real connections. So you have friends and clients. It's not just all business all the time. And if you're some diva speaker who, has a rider that says only red Skittles in the bowl when I get there, and you're hard to work with and you're difficult to communicate with, even if you're exceptional, people are less inclined to book you. So what I love is meeting new people and building relationships. And that's what I do. And it's not this, of course, as business grows, I'm working to hone the processes and create client acquisition funnels. There's all these things that I am working on. But for anybody that's afraid to get started, it's start with your network, look for areas to bring value, and then look for opportunities to get in front of people. And that's why I tell people if you have a high value and clear value proposition offer that you can come in and train somebody's company on, well, you could get in front of 20 or 30 or 40 people to talk about something, give value first, and then make an offer to connect after. So that's a big thing for me, is whatever it is get started and get rolling, because you learn so much more by getting in and implementing and trying and all of this versus, the theorizing or drowning in the, I'm just going to post on social media and hopefully people will come to me. It's like, for me, it's far better to create direct, real, meaningful relationships and build from there. And as a result of that, like you said, there have been a lot of things in motion for a long time. And for me, my dad is a great salesperson. He spent 30 years in sales, and, good, authentic, real sales, not like used car salesman type of strat, like authentic, genuine relationship-based sales. And so he's taught me things throughout my life. My mentors have taught me. And so for me, it's not pushing, it's not forcing, it's not trying to, not everyone's a prospect. They're not everyone is. So treat people like people, get to know people. And then where mutual value exchanges become possible, then explore those. And so I've been able to build my business, and I've had, again, my best month ever in August, better than my best quarter prior. And there are a couple of things that, if any, there's lots of things out there, like lines in the water. So I'm playing the long game in multiple areas, but I'd say the biggest thing for anyone considering this route, don't count on any of them, because I have had things that seemed like a sure shot that fell through. I've had yeses that at the point of payment fell through. So don't expect it, don't count on it, but play the long game, build relationships, ask for referrals, make it clear what you do, and it's incredible what can come.
And that is what it's all about. Well, I want to thank you for being here with us again. This has been every bit as fun and inspiring as I thought it would be. I hope it was for you. Last question. Have you paid off your student loan yet?
No, but I've paid, I think I'm down to like 20,000, 24, 22,000
from 80,000.
From 80,000. So, that's the thing is I looked at it and was like, yeah, I'd really love to pay those off. But as I've been playing the game, it's like figuring out how to, so I have never missed a payment. I'll say that. So even in my dark times, I'm still paying the loans, because I'm like, I want to find a way to do this while paying them off. And ideally, if I hit some of my bigger goals this year, I could almost completely wipe those out. So working towards that for sure. But it was something where find a way to create manageable debt and then continually pay it off, but not quite there yet. But my brother, who's a financial advisor, has reminded me several times and said, like, Brian, to have paid off, almost 3/4 of that by 33 years old, which I am now, is huge. So instead of going, I've still got 20 grand to go, I go, hey, I've come a huge way with all the ups and downs. So yeah. So I hope by the end of this year to be like, hey, Michael, I did it. All gone, click that final pay button and just wipe it out.
Let us know when that happens. Well, I want to thank you. Cool. Well, I want to thank you again for being here. This has been a lot of fun. We'll have to figure out what to do for a third one, but this has really been enjoyable.
Absolutely.
Tell us again, if people want to reach out and maybe take some opportunities to get coached by you or look for you as a speaker or whatever, how do they do that?
So best way, the Brian Drury on all social media. So TheBrian and then Drury. So D as in David, RURY. So at the Brian Drury on all social media. I'm most active on LinkedIn right now. So you can just search me. You'll find me very easily on LinkedIn. And then if you want to email me directly, also my website, thebriandrury.com. So everything social is thebriandrury or thebriandrury.com. And then my email, again, I'll do my spelling bee here. So Brian at guidetospeaking.com. And that's the number 2. So BRIAN at GUIDE, the number 2, SPEAKING.com. So I really feel like I'm at the National Spelling Bee. So those are the best ways to reach out if you want to book me for an event or coaching or connect or just share some feedback. Michael and I love feedback and we love doing this type of show. So if you have like an insight you want to share, you can send it to me. I'll let Michael know. So we'd love to hear from everyone listening.
And that goes the other way as well. If you want to share with me, I will let Brian know. We would love to hear from you. You can reach me in a couple of different ways. We're on LinkedIn, especially, and Facebook at M. Hinkson, and LinkedIn is Michael Hinkson. But you can reach me at Michael, MICHAELHI, at Accessibe, ACCESSIBE.com, or go to our podcast page, www.michaelhinkson.com/podcast. Love to hear from you. I'd love to hear any referrals that you might have who might want to be guests on podcast, Unstoppable Mindset. And in general, any thoughts that you have, we all want to know them. So please reach out and let us know what you're thinking. Please give us a 5-star rating wherever you're listening to us. We appreciate that as well. And I just want to thank you all for the time that you have put to listening to us today and for being here. And Brian, once again, thank you for making this possible and being here, and for giving us so many insights again today.
Thanks for having me, Michael. I look forward to it again. I'm looking forward to getting to know you better and better, and hopefully meeting up sometime soon because we're both in Southern California. So thank you for having me. It's always fun, man. It's great to see you.